Man, I'm really glad I didn't pay money to go see this game tonight. Some of you probably know I was thinking about going to the game after attending the Warriors game the other night, but with the kids, the fact that the Bulls haven't really inspired a ton of confidence in me to pay a lot of money to see them live. So yeah, it was a good call. I mean, yes, the Bulls didn't get blown out and embarrassed, and they made it competitive at the end of the game until they didn't, which I'll get back to and how they completely fell apart in the final minutes of it. But regardless of making it a close game on a long road trip, there is no denying this team is an absolute mess. Problems on multiple fronts, and I have a hard time seeing things getting any better until some changes have been made. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a good Sacramento Kings team. Like, this isn't the joke of a team that we've seen so many years in the past. They are likely going to be making the playoffs for the first time since, 2006? So I'm not saying there should be a ton of shame in losing to a team like the Kings, especially on the very end of a long road trip, and at least keeping it somewhat competitive. But how many times are we going to see the Bulls finding themselves in a big deficit, especially in the third quarter? They come back and make it a game and again, and then blow it in the final minutes of the game because of careless decision making down the stretch. And I'm sorry, but it starts with the Bulls' two best players in DeMar DeRozan and Zach Lavine. Terrible shot selection, bad turnovers, mental lapses on defense, and trying to stay with their man. And look, I know without these guys, this team likely becomes the worst team in the NBA, but I cannot get over how poor their decision making is at times and their incessant need to drop ISO plays and play hero ball. It's funny because it worked last season, right? Because the shots were falling, but that's not the case this season. The shots aren't falling and it's costing the Bulls games, and you would think that maybe they would have the presence of mind to maybe change up their game a bit, to actually getting other guys involved, playing team ball in a style that is more conducive to actually keeping defenses guessing from what they're going to do. Like, have we not established already that teams have all figured out how to stop the Bulls with their style of play and simply relying on DeMar and sometimes Zach down the stretch? It's way too predictable, and it's why you're seeing those shots that were going down last season not being the case this year, partly because, I don't know, the Bulls shooting has also just fallen off, but also the fact that these ISO mid-range jumpers are much more heavily contested than they were before because teams know that it's coming. And I know Zach had a good game, at least for the first three quarters or so, probably the best game that he's had all season, but it doesn't take away from those bad shots that he hoisted when the Bulls were within one possession, around 5 minutes to go, that led to breaks on the other end for the Kings to score, not setting up a play, not playing off a catch and shoot when he doesn't have a man in his face. It's just really baffling to me that Billy Donovan hasn't been more in his ear about this in practice. And the same goes for DeMar. I don't want to just harp on Zach because Zach actually had a really good game today. DeMar has been really bad recently with his play in late game situations, turning the ball over, getting rejected when driving to the basket. He committed that foul the other night on that three-point shooter, which was the difference in the Bulls losing that game or winning it. And the other thing that has been concerning for DeMar is the slow starts that he's been having to games. He's been coming through in the second half in recent games, but has been a non-factor in the first half. Tonight, 2 points in the first half. The game against the Warriors didn't have a single field goal in the first half, just scoring off free throws in that one. And the other concerning thing is the efficiency. 6 for 18 tonight, only 6 free throws. His ability to draw contact and get to the line hasn't been as effective, as more often than not he ends up turning the ball over. It's a no call in which he then complains rather than getting back on defense. Sometimes the complaints are valid, don't get me wrong, but you still have to get back on D. Now, what I will say about Zach Lavine though, and I mentioned this in the live chat during the game, this finally felt like a game where Zach was looking like he was truly starting to come back to form. The Zach Lavine that could score at will with elite finishing around the rim, who could heat up with his shooting, who had incredible first step and his slashing ability to get to the basket. You saw a lot of that tonight for the first time in a while and on a consistent basis. It doesn't change the poor decision making and shot selection in this one, but it was the most encouraging sign we have seen from Zach Lavine thus far from what we used to see before he injured that knee last season. Like, aside from the final quarter against the Nets in Brooklyn, which he took over that game and won it for the Bulls, this was by far and away Zach's most complete game. 41 points on 16 for 28 shooting, 3 for 9 from 3, 8 rebounds, 4 steals. Like, he was even getting it done on defense. Maybe he heard what Stacey King said the other night on the broadcast when they played the Suns, talking about how Devin Booker has really elevated his game by becoming a great two-way player, and straight up said, why can't Zach Lavine? Hopefully that gives Zach some confidence, some momentum going forward. Again, I just need to see his decision-making improve in late-game situations. It also didn't help that no one else really stepped up in Zach's breakout game. Vooch had a pretty quiet night, 12 points, 6 rebounds. Patrick, back in the starting lineup as Javonte Green was out, he was decent, 10 points, 5 rebounds, a couple of blocks to go with it. He he still has these really bad turnovers where he just fumbles a pass and you're like, how does that happen to an NBA basketball player? But that aside, it was a pretty good game from Pat in responding to his demotion to getting moved to the bench. And then the bench, I mean, no one really showed up well at all tonight. One thing that has been bothering me recently, and it was the most apparent at the game I was at against the Warriors, is the demeanor, the body language, and effort that we have seen change from Andre Drummond. Like, this is the Andre Drummond I was wary of when the Bulls signed him. Kind of lazy, not really caring when he's on the court, not really giving maximum effort, and I was completely blown away when we saw the opposite from Drummond at the start of the season. But now that the Bulls are losing in a slump, it just doesn't seem like his heart is into it as it was before. And it's why you see Billy barely playing him tonight and decided to go with Derrick Jones Jr. at the 5, which has actually worked out decently well for the Bulls dating back to last season when the Bulls wanted to play small ball. But anyway, I really hope that is just an isolated thing for Drummond and that he doesn't just start giving up on the season, because we're definitely going to need his size and rebounding with our limited size as it is. Derrick Jones Jr. playing the 5 is fun and all, but it's not going to work long term, especially if the Bulls want to make a shot at the playoffs. Crazy to say we're talking about this team maybe not making the playoffs, but here we are. You know, the other piece I'll add, talking about the multiple problems the Bulls face as a team right now. Like, aside from the shooting, which we all know has been a problem, even dating to last season, which is why it was a shock to me that the front office did absolutely nothing to improve their shooting in the offseason. Aside from the rim protection and the depth in the front court, aside from the critiques that we give Billy Donovan and his coaching for not being able to utilize this group to their strengths when they have a lot of talent, to me, it's the lack of heart you see from this team. Yeah, you see it here and there. They have some good stretches with energy, a lot of effort, but the heart of this team isn't there. You can see it in their body language and the way they carry themselves. You can see it in the fact that they don't come hungry to start games and are always needing to claw their way back from a big deficit. And you can see there is oftentimes very little communication on the court. And the Bulls quite simply don't have that guy who is going to be the one getting in players' faces. That goon, as Big Dave likes to call them, the guy who is going to be getting you hyped and wanting to play harder, who is holding you accountable for your play. The Bulls do not have that type of player or leader on this team. Yeah, you can see it to an extent with Alex Caruso, but that's really it. You're not seeing that type of leadership from guys like Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Vucevic. They're just not those types of players. We need a Joakim Noah level player on this team, which, yes, I know those kind of players are really hard to come by, but without a player or players who are going to be that vocal leader, that energizer, that player that will call you out if you're not giving a maximum effort, I don't see this team really changing much of what we're currently seeing without that. I hope I'm wrong, because I want to see this team succeed. I want to see them build off of what they had last season, but it's hard to see how that's going to happen based on what we're seeing right now. A lot needs to change in order to get this team turned around. Anyway, the Bulls are off a bit until Wednesday for some much needed rest before they take on the Wizards back at home. I'll have some content out this week, so keep an eye out for it. Until then, guys, be sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.